Podcast Network Asia.
Welcome to She Talks Peace, a podcast that highlights the role of women peacebuilders around the world in bringing lasting peace and security to communities. Eavesdrop on their communities and get to know their stories. From the Philippines to Malaysia, from Indonesia to Palestine, from Myanmar to the United States, their dreams and hopes for a world without violence and a world where every woman and girl can be whoever she wants to be. Hosted by Amina Bernardo, President of the Philippine Center for Islam and Democracy. This is She Talks Peace.
We've not seen an increase in the percentage, the number of women in politics, as much as we've been pushing for it, as much as we have been celebrating Women's Month every year, egging on and advocating for more women in politics. Unfortunately, the numbers would tell us otherwise.
Hello, everyone. Salam, salam. Welcome to another episode of She Talks Peace. I'm Amina Rasul of the Philippine Center for Islam and Democracy, saying hello from Manila. My co-host, Professor Dr. Ayesa Abubakar, is still can't join us after her eye surgery, and she just moved from Sabah to Penang. More about that and her move when she joins us for the next episode. You know, dear listeners, I remembered a friend once telling me that women's voices in a democracy is like the sound of canaries in a coal mine. You know what canaries are, right? They're those cute little yellow birds that tweet so beautifully. During the Industrial Revolution, miners would bring these little cute yellow canaries with them into the mines. If the canaries continued to sing as they went inside the mines, then they knew it was safe. If the canaries stopped, then the miners knew that the mine was filled with poisonous gas. In a democracy, my friend told me that women's voices are really like those canaries in a coal mine. If we women are heard, democracy is safe and alive. But if women's voices are silenced, then democracy is dying or dead. There is overwhelming evidence that women's participation in politics, in elections, is quite beneficial to both our communities and our societies, to peace, stability, and security of the nation and the state. But unfortunately, we are far from reaching the goal of equal participation. Why is that, do you think? Last week, our guest, Dr. Socorro Reyes, talked about how the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region of Muslim Mindanao, or BARMM, has recently approved its electoral code. What is BARMM? The BARMM is an autonomous region for Muslims in Mindanao, in the Philippines, that has been established by law as part of the implementation of a peace agreement with the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, or MILF. The MILF has been at war with our government since the 70s, finally signing a peace agreement on January 24, 2014. The Philippine government's chief negotiator was Professor Miriam Coronel Ferrer, who has been our guest in a previous episode, and chief negotiator of the MILF, Mohager Iqbal, who is now the Minister for Education. They signed a peace agreement in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. Now, what is interesting about this electoral code, according to Sok Reyes, is that while they lobbied very hard for more women participating in elections, they wanted what they call the zipper style. That when you are a party and you have candidates for parliament, then it would be male, female in the roster, or female, male, female, male. Well, that didn't make it, but the electoral code did include I guess a good enough number of women that should be represented by each political party. So this latest mechanism for the BARMM regional government was approved unanimously, as I understand it, with 64 affirmative votes and 0 negative votes. So, well, let's see what's going to happen now that there is an electoral code in the whole country, in the Philippines. It's been taken for granted that women can freely participate in elections. They can participate in decision making. There are no barriers to their political participation. But it's always been a question mark in the minds of many women, many feminists who want to see more women representation. Why is it that there is no women's vote? That's something intriguing, I would think. And I thought that perhaps today we would invite a guest who is very, very engaged in education, for electoral participation, for clean and honest elections, for truthful elections. So we have invited Attorney Ona Caritos of the Legal Network for Truthful Elections, or Lente. And I suppose Attorney Ona will also be telling us a little bit about the BARMM Electoral Code from her point of view. Attorney Rona Caritos, or Ona, has been an advocate of fair elections since her law school days in the Ateneo de Manila University. She has been serving as the executive director of Lente for 9 years now. Lente is a network of lawyers and paralegals working for truthful elections in the Philippines. She has also served as one of the consultants of the Gender and Development Office of former Commission on Elections Commissioner Rowena Guanzon, who's also been our guest on She Talks Peace. Ona also worked as an election analyst in the Asian Network for Free Elections, or ANFREL, when they had an observation mission in Sri Lanka. Recently, she became a legal consultant under the Office of Commission on Human Rights Commissioner Roberto Cadiz, and a mentor in the Development Entrepreneurship Program, which provides training and mentoring for leaders to support policy reform. So why don't we welcome Attorney Ona to the show? Hi, Ona!
Magandang hapon po, Ma'am Amina. Magandang araw. Magandang araw to all our viewers of Shito.
Welcome, welcome, Ona. So what did you think about the BARMM Electoral Code, Ona?
First of all, we would like to congratulate po the BTA for passing the electoral code. It's
Yeah.
a code that's been a long time coming because we've been working for it. All of us have been working for it for the past 2 years, especially during the pandemic. The electoral code is not a perfect code. No code is perfect, but
Mhm.
as it stands now, at least we will have parliamentary elections this 2025. We'll see how the code will be implemented for the first time. If ever there are changes to be needed to be done in the electoral code, then we leave it to the newly elected parliament to change the electoral code as they deem fit to change it to better improve the elections in BARMM.
So they have already approved, they passed the electoral code. Elections for BARMM is supposed to be held in 2025. Ona, do you think they have enough time to prepare? Because, dear listeners, the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region has a different governance system from the nation. The Philippines is a presidential form of government, but in BARMM, the law allowed it to have a parliamentary form of government. So, what do you think, Ona? Is there enough time for the regional government to have elections in 2025?
It's really important that the BTA pass this code this first quarter of the year so that it will give more time to our COMELEC and to the Bangsamoro Electoral Office to prepare. Because this is the first time that we'll be having parliamentary elections in the country. So I think, in my opinion, Ma'am Amina, that COMELEC has time. They have enough time, sufficient time to prepare and educates most especially all the stakeholders in BARMM about this new electoral code.
What are Lente's plans in the regional government? What will Lente be doing to ensure that we do have a successful election in 2025?
One of the more important provisions po, Ma'am Amina, in the electoral code is the function of political parties to regularly and consistently conduct voters' education, not only for their constituents, but for all the people in the Bangsamoro. So, as one of our plans for the upcoming BARMM parliamentary elections, we'll be working closely with the different ministries in capacitating and educating our people, discussing with our people the need to know major provisions in the Bangsamoro Electoral Code that they won't be surprised by election day by 2025.
It seems to me in our national elections, there's always this question mark if it's going to proceed because there's some procedural problems. And the thing is, Ona, you have the electoral code, and then you're going to have barangay elections for the entire country. So, what's going to happen in the meantime?
I think there's no reason or excuse for our Commission on Elections to say that they're preparing for the village elections this October. They're supposed to prepare not only for the village elections this October, but also to prepare for the midterm elections, our regular national and local elections this 2025, and the BARMM parliamentary elections. They still have 2.5 years, Ma'am Amina, to prepare for that, the midterm and the BARMM parliamentary elections. So they can't use the village elections this October as an excuse that they don't have much time.
Excuse. But Ona, let's go to the more fascinating topic, the topic of women and
Mhm.
election. All these 9 years that you've been the executive director of Lente, have you seen improvement in the numbers of women's participation in elections?
Yeah, but naman po yung 9 years, Ma'am Amanda, I feel my age. You've seen me literally and figuratively grow the past
Oh, you're
years.
only half my age, Ona, so don't worry about it.
Okay po. But, Bob, we're jolly now. We're happy at this point. But unfortunately, my answer to this question is not a happy answer. We've not seen an increase in the percentage, the number of women in politics, as
Uh-huh.
much as we've been pushing for it, as much as we have been celebrating Women's Month every year, egging on and advocating for more women in politics. Unfortunately, the numbers would tell us otherwise. So we're really hopeful with the Bangsamoro Electoral Code because now it has a provision which mandates all political parties that 30% of its nominees for the political party elections in the parliamentary should be coming from the women sector. And if ever that nominee and that winner or nominee would be replaced, she would still be replaced by the same sex. So we're hopeful with the Bangsamoro Electoral Code because we're seeing for the first time a systematic or a legal way of correcting what we've seen for the past decades, what the wrong that we've seen for the past decades in Philippine politics. That there's no framework or there's no mandate for our government, for our political parties and candidates to have more women in their rosters.
Do you think there's a possibility, Ona, that the BARMM Electoral Code, at least as far as women's representation in political parties are concerned, do you think this could be like a trigger, a driver for the entire country to also pay attention? Because they always say in the Muslim South, women are second class citizens. They prefer women to stay at home, and then all of a sudden you've got an electoral code that says at least 30% of the
Mhm.
nominees should be women. So what do you think, On? Are you optimistic that this could be like a really great example?
I am optimistic, Ma'am Amina, that this would be a great example, not only for women's political participation, but also for the kind of government that the BARM have right now, because we're also looking at is the parliamentary system of government also the government that we need for the whole country, not only for the Bangsamoro region. So I'm hopeful, Ma'am Amina, that this would be the start of something new, and this would be something that that the entire country could replicate outside of foreign.
People have been saying that the Philippines is an example in ASEAN and in Asia because we have elected two women as president. We have elected two women as vice president. But there are also many who say that just because you're a woman and you're elected to high position, it doesn't mean that you bring the women's agenda. What would you say to that, Ona?
Again, I my answer to that is a sad answer because I also agree with that statement. A lot of countries have been lauding the Philippines as one of the trailblazers when it comes to women's political participation because we've elected two as our highest official in the land. But unfortunately, just like economics, this
Mm.
phenomenon of having women as leaders
Mhm.
does not trickle down to the local government or to the other positions in government. So unfortunately, we still have much to do when it comes to women's political participation.
Let's go to a more interesting topic for discussion. The Philippines is held up as a major example in Asia for
Mhm.
women's political participation because we have elected two women as president, two women are vice president, but there are also many who say that just because women are elected to these high positions in government, it does not mean that they bring with them the agenda of uh, of women. So tell me, Ona, in your experience working on elections, does it really matter? Do women in politics really have an impact?
I believe that women in politics really have an impact, Ma'am Amina, because the perspective of a women leader, especially in politics, they have a different perspective attack on the policies and programs that the government would take. Unfortunately, sometimes when women candidates are egging on voters to vote for them. They always have the woman card to push or to convince voters to vote for them. Unfortunately, when these women candidates are elected in office, And when it comes to the issues which really matter to the sector, they don't vote for the sector. So that's the phenomenon of women leaders not voting for the interests of the sector that they're supposed to represent. But I still believe that we still need to elect women leaders, because when we have a government solely composed mostly of men, the policies or the directions that government would take would really not be that equal or would benefit the women sectors.
Your experience in monitoring elections and campaigning for truthful elections, did you ever uh, have reports about women running who are being harassed? Let me give you an example. There were interviews, there were articles about the experience, for instance, of the mayor of Tokyo, the first woman
Mhm.
to be elected mayor, and some other female political leaders who talked about the harassment that they suffered online and while campaigning, attributing all kinds of sexual allegations about them, trying to get them out of the race. Does this happen in the Philippines? Have you received reports about such practices?
We've received reports, and unfortunately, again, with the rise of the use of social media,
Hmm.
the reports have increased through the years, because people now are more comfortable because probably of anonymity, or their statements, their discriminatory statements would not be they would not be held accountable for this discriminatory statements. We've seen the rise in the increase of discriminatory statements, not only against women politicians, women candidates, but also against women voters or women
Mhm.
advocates. And unfortunately, uh, we can only do so much. We've reported this post. We've accepted, and reports have been given to us by these women, individuals who are complaining against fellow voters or fellow or advocates. Unfortunately, the action is not that fast or not that efficient or that effective to, deter or minimize this discriminatory statements.
No penalties, right, Ona? No penalties.
Well, we have cyber libel po, Ma'am Amina, but a lot of people, unfortunately, especially women, when
Mhm.
they receive discriminatory statements or abusive statements against them, for example, violence, some
Mhm.
people would always say, "Relating kita." We
Yeah, yeah,
always see that in social
yeah.
media, especially at the height of the campaign period. Only one or two in 10 women who receive statements like that would complain. I would really go for filing a case against those individuals. But most of the time, women just suffer in silence, and they will just say to themselves, hindi na lang ako magpa-participate next time. I will not be that much active the next time around, so that I won't be exposed to statements like this.
Because the truth of cyberbullying is the fact that you don't really know who's
Yes.
bullying you.
Mhm,
So
yes.
who to file a complaint against, right? That becomes tricky.
Mhm, mhm. Well, you can ask for the assistance of the NBI, but not a lot of people would go through that
Yeah.
process of going to the NBI and filing a complaint. Again, just like what I mentioned earlier po, Ma'am Amina, they would just chalk it up to experience, and they would just tell themselves that next time I won't just say my support or express my support to this certain candidate, so I won't be exposed to abusive, violent statements like that.
Yeah. Women are doubly
Mhm.
marginalized, right? In terms of access, for instance, to opportunities, and then even more marginalized when there are issues like this, and there is no outlet for them to
Mhm.
seek protection for themselves. But speaking
Parang
about
mhm.
marginalized, Ona, You, it seems, are the reason that indigenous people have accessible voting centers. And the reason why the Commission on Elections has a vulnerable sectors office. So tell us more about these accessible voting centers for indigenous peoples. What's the difference between that and regular voting
Mhm.
centers?
Ma'am Amina, thank you for that compliment. But first of all, it's not the work of Lente, it's the work of the IP organizations, which push for the creation of the Vulnerable Sector Office and the accessible voting centers in Comelec. When Lente started out po, Ma'am Amina, 10 years ago, one of our core advocacies is to push for a more inclusive election, especially for the vulnerable sectors. And as you know, Ma'am Amina, Lente started out in Ateneo Human Rights Center, and most
Right.
of its volunteers are interns from Ateneo Human Rights Center. And our internship program, it's mostly in Mindoro. So lumaki po kami or nagka-internship kami with the Mangyans of the two
Mm,
Mindoros. And we've seen how they've been marginalized, they've been harassed. We've heard stories of how they're harassed, how they're shepherded into resorts and for them not to vote on election day. So I started working in Lente personally po, I made it my mission to do something to improve the stories that I've heard from my Mangyan family when I lived with them a decade ago. And fortunately, for everyone's information, most of the indigenous people's communities, they live far away from the center of
yes,
the town or municipality. And
right,
when they vote on election day, they need to travel for hours.
right.
Most of them, they travel by foot, they cross rivers, they go down the mountains for them to exercise their right to vote. And during this transit time or the transit period, this is the time that they're most exposed to harassment,
Mhm.
intimidation, and threats. So they're not able to vote freely and fairly according to their will. So we push for the creation of the accessible voting center, meaning the voting center will be located in the community, inside the community of the indigenous people. So they don't need to walk for hours. They don't need to cross rivers and face harassment, threats, and discrimination coming from candidates, the supporters of this candidate. So that was one of the actually milestones that we got out of our work in Lente, Ma'am Amina, the creation of accessible voting centers, which started in Mindoro and now has expanded to a number of IP places all over the country po.
That's really quite amazing. And to our listeners, the Mangyan uh, group is one of the hundreds, no? Of it. How
Mhm.
many hundreds of indigenous peoples do we have in the Philippines? I can't even remember. But the Mangyans are in the middle of the Philippines in Mindoro, and tourism tip here. They do exquisite weaving of bamboo and nito baskets. And if ever any of you, dear listeners, are in Manila visiting, go to the Ayala Museum. They always carry beautiful Mangyan items at the museum shop. One of my favorite places to shop. But it's great to hear about what's happening now to support indigenous peoples. I keep wondering. It's great that they have voting centers now in the communities. That's a major step. But when you're looking at the participation for instance of women in elections in the indigenous people's community, is it the same percentage as the nation? Is it worse? Are we able to reach them in terms of education of women about their rights to participate on it?
From our experience po in our communities, it's not the same as the whole country because most of the time, uh, the ones who stay in the communities to take care of the kids or to take care of
Mhm.
the livestock are the women members
Yeah.
of the community. The priority for on election day is for the male members of the community to vote and go out on election day. So these accessible voting centers, it's very important for them, for these women voters, for these women IP voters, so that they could exercise their right to vote on election day because they don't need to stay in their communities. They don't need to take care of the livestock, choosing choosing this task instead of voting on election day. So what we've seen in the IT communities that more the women voters are most affected on election day because the male voters go out first before they are able to vote.
Anna, why do you think we don't have a women's party? Is that a pipe dream? Will women never support a women's party?
I think that is a possibility po, Ma'am Amina, but it needs lot of work. It needs lots of mobilization and constituency building. We've seen how political it is, not only to build on all women party, but for example, an LGBTIQ plus party. It's
Right.
very political, so it needs lots of work and it needs lots of constituency building and political work because someone has to give, someone has to see the win-win formula to building an all-women party and not just for a party or just for a certain group in that party to be the overall winner. So it's in the pipeline, Ma'am Amina. It's a dream, but hopefully we see that during our lifetime, that all-women party.
During your lifetime, Ona. I don't know about my lifetime. Because I was just thinking, you have women's party lists in
Mm-hmm.
Congress. But I keep wondering why they don't expand. For instance, Ona, the village elections, the barangay elections are coming.
Mm-hmm.
And wouldn't it have been practical and effective if some of these women's party lists, for instance, support selected women to run, not even for the village captain position, but to be a member of the council? That doesn't take
Mm-hmm.
a lot of effort, right? It's looking for the right candidate, giving them education. So tell me why that doesn't seem to be happening, Ona.
Because of our own Omnibus Election Code. The Omnibus
Ah,
Election Code provides that the barangay elections should be non-partisan.
mhm.
So partyless groups, political parties should not play a role in the village election. So that's one of the factors. I think that's one of the biggest factor why why partyless groups and political parties can support women in the village councils or in the barangay election.
And yet majority of those elected as village captains or barangay captains all belong to major political groups,
Or
but
supported po.
or
The
supported.
supporters.
Yeah.
Yes.
So maybe that's something that Gabriela and the others can actually be looking at. I mean, training women, for instance, for political
Mm-hmm.
participation. But you're right. It could happen in your lifetime, Ona. And I will put
I
my
think there's
fingers
a need to strategize
crossed.
po, Ma'am Abine.
Yeah.
We've worked a lot with the barangays because of our
Hmm.
youth political participation project in the office. And we've seen the disparity in the ratio between male and female barangay officials. We
Hmm.
see more male barangay chairpersons,
Right.
male SK chairpersons compared to
Right.
female barangay chairpersons and SK chairpersons. So there is an opportunity in the village elections and in the village government structure that women could uh, enter or that women could participate in.
Before we go, Ona, may I ask, what is your message for the women, especially young women who are listening to us? What is your wish for women in politics, women in elections?
My wish is to see more women in politics and in elections. We've always said that political dynasties, political families is one of the biggest problems in Philippine elections. The second biggest problem is the lack of opportunities for women candidates and women, especially youth women advocates, to be part of the elections and to be part of the decision making circles, decision making spheres in our government and in our society. So my wish is to see more women candidates, more women leaders in the different government positions all over the country. Not only in the national, but more so in the local, because we need more women leaders in the local government units. Because at the local government unit, you can really see change happening, and I
Right.
think women really should be at the forefront of change in the different localities all over the country.
So maybe if there are development partners listening, they can support Lente do an education and training program for women, particularly young women, on political participation, how to
Mhm.
work within the system, how to campaign, what your rights are. We will hope and pray for that to happen, Ona. So
Would love to work with everyone on this to
I think
increase women participation in politics.
it's about time, and maybe we can knock on the door of the vice president, Sara Duterte, to reach out and encourage more women to run for
Mhm.
the village council. So
Mhm,
thank you
mhm.
so much, Ona, Executive Director Caritos of the Lente, for joining us today and tackling this matter that's so close to my heart, the topic of women in politics. Harinawa, inshallah, we will see major changes in our lifetime, Ona, including mine. So
Yes, po.
thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ona. And dear listeners, you heard Ona Caritos of Lente. And this is Amina Rasul saying thanks for joining us today, and hope to have you join us again next week for our next exciting conversation. So from Manila and the Philippine Center for Islam and Democracy, see you soon. Take care. Bye for now.
She Talks Peace is brought to you in partnership with Podcast Network Asia and Podmetrics, the easiest way to monetize your podcast. For more information, check out their website at podcastnetwork.asia and podmetrics.co.
The views and opinions expressed by the podcast creators, hosts, and guests do not necessarily reflect the official policy and position of Podcast Network Asia, the hosts of the program, or other programs of the network. Any content provided by the people on the podcast are of their own opinion and are not intended to malign any religion, ethnic group, club, organization, company, individual, or anyone or anything.